Today, we're talking about how to tune a brass instrument and how you can use intonation to turn yourself into a better performer. Stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Aaron here, helping musicians get better, faster through performances, educational videos, and product reviews. And again, today we're talking about tuning on a brass instrument. Now, I do new videos similar to this one every single week, so if you're new here, consider subscribing to get more videos like this directly to you. And I also want to preface, this is a practical guide, so I'm not going to get into the scientific things of like sound waves and hertz and decibels and all that kind of stuff. If you want more information like that, Trent Hamilton did a fantastic video on that, and I'll link that in the description down below. We're going to be mostly talking about how you can physically and actively fix intonation on your instrument. So intonation, or like playing in tune, is getting your note to either be in line, on a tuner, or be in line with the ensemble or accompanimental or whatever you're playing with. It's playing with the notes that are matching each other. So in talking about intonation, if you are too sharp, we're saying you are too high in pitch and you need to bring it down. And if we say you are flat, you are too low in pitch and you need to bring it up. Your biggest tools to being able to tell if you're out of tune, again, would be a tuner or your ear and really listening to see if you match what is going on around you. Say you're playing in a trumpet section, another person's playing the exact same part, you guys are hitting the same valves, you're on the right partials, but things don't sound quite right. It's probably because one of you is not lining up with the other, and you want to work to find that intonation, and that's what we're going to talk about, is how to get that to work for you. So before we get into messing with the plumbing of the instrument, I do want to discuss intonation and changing the pitch with your chops. As many of you already probably know, depending on the way you place your embouchure or the way that you open up or close down your embouchure while you're playing a specific note, you can adjust the pitch a little bit while you're playing. This is a really good way to tune on the fly, or if you're playing an instrument like, let's say, French horn, that you can't readily get to the slides very quickly because one hand is on the valves and another hand is in the bell. If you can't, adjust all of a sudden, you can use your embouchure to make those quick fixes for you. And that's where I suggest lipping down or lipping up is strictly for those on the fly moments where you need to change your intonation. And once you get your plumbing set, which we'll talk about in a second, then using your chops to kind of change things up that way. I don't like lipping up or lipping down too much, or using it for specific notes, or anything like that if I can help it, just because you're not playing that note where it is the most comfortable, so therefore it's not going to also sound the best. So that's how I suggest using that, is just kind of almost as a last resort. If you've done everything you can and the note's still out, maybe trying to lip up or down that way. But because you're going to hurt your intonation and also you're going to hurt your endurance because you're constantly moving, I would stray away from trying to use your chops to tune frequently. And then another thing I want to touch on is the way you're using your air. If you're not using good air, you will notice that your pitch will probably tend to drop or go up one way or the other that way as well. And just keep in mind that the way you use your air is going to change everything, and you want to make sure that if you're using a tuner to tune, or if you're tuning at the beginning of a rehearsal or a concert, or with a piano player or with an oboe or clarinet or whatever you ensemble happens to use, that you want to make sure you play at a very comfortable level in terms of volume, because that's going to get a best result for your intonation that way. So the best way we can go about changing our intonation and fixing our intonation is actually by using the slides that we have on our instrument. So on my euphonium, I have all of these slides going on, and what slide is working depends on what valves I am pushing down. On all the brass instruments, there's what they call the main tuning slide, which is if you're not pushing any valves down, this is the one slide that is active, and that's the one that if you're tuning a fundamental note like concert F or concert B flat, if you're tuning those notes, you're trying to find a very comfortable spot for your instrument. And that's the one that you want to try to get the most in tune, is your main tuning slide. That one is the one that is going to kind of dictate everything, because even when I start pushing buttons and activating other slides, that slide is still activated as well. So you want to really keep in mind where that one is. But like I said, we have all these other slides too. Like, I've got this guy right here. Well, as soon as I push this button down, it becomes active. This slide starts working. So if I'm playing a note with first valve and it's a little out of tune, I can actually just, slide this down. Or if I notice that all of my first valve notes are really sharp, I can, do that. Or if I notice they're really flat, I can push it in. And you just kind of want to be aware of where all of your slides are, what they're connected to, and how they work on your instrument. And the slides can also be used for on-the-fly changes of intonation. A lot of tuba players, they keep their hand up there and they move the slides that are up top as they're playing. Obviously, trombone itself is just a large tuning slide. Even my euphonium has like a paddle that moves my main tuning slide, so I can at least adjust and get a little bit more flat while I'm on the go and moving and anything like that. So those things are really handy as well. Not all instruments are equipped that way, like we talked about French horn earlier, where you can do that all the time. But if you have those instruments, take advantage of those situations as well. And how do you know which way to pull and which way to do all that kind of stuff? Well, as someone in high school said, and it stuck with me, if you're sharp, it's like a tack, and if you set on a tack, you'd want to pull it out, right? So if you're sharp, you want to pull out your slide. It's silly, but it has stuck with me, and it's something I tell my younger students, and they grab onto it, so there you go. If it's sharp, you're sharp like a tack, so you want to pull it out. Another way to think about it is, really small instruments are really, really high. Think like piccolo and flute, whereas really low instruments like the tuba are really big. So if you're too high, you need to make your instrument bigger. If you are too low, you need to make it smaller. Just like in the bare bones of like way too easy science, that's kind of how things are working there. And keep in mind, you cannot just get everything in tune. You can't sit down with a tuner in your home one day and get everything in tune, right dead center on a tuner, and then expect it to be okay when you go somewhere else, because unfortunately we play a brass instrument, and the brass instrument actually goes through changes throughout the day. And what I mean by changes is, if you were ever told in like science class or anything like that, metal expands as it gets warmer and gets smaller as it gets colder, well, our horns work in the same way. It's just not enough for us to really physically see it happening. So let's say it's marching band season, you're in Georgia, and it's, July, and it's really hot, but you guys have been rehearsing in the nice cold auditorium, and then you go outside. Well, because your instrument's getting really hot, it's going to become really, really sharp. And if you go back into that auditorium and it's cold again, your instrument's going to go really, really flat. So you have to constantly be listening and adjusting and moving, because things are going to change depending on where you are and how you're playing, or even how much hot air you've been blowing into the instrument, or stage lights hitting you. You've got to be aware of all those things and adjust accordingly because of that. A lot of times if I'm playing and I tune and we get through the first piece, I'll also pull out after the first piece or even midway through the first piece, just because I know my intonation has already changed just because of the stage lights and blowing through the instrument. And just because you get a slide in tune doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay in tune when you jump partials or octaves. For instance, in my playing, my regular in the staff E flat first valve sounds great, but when I jump up an octave, I know it's going to be sharp, so I know to use my thumb trigger to push that note down. And it's like that on a lot of instruments. All of my tuba students, I have them push their first valve slide out while they're playing that higher E flat, because it tends to be sharp. And that leads me to how you can actually improve your intonation, is knowing the tendencies of your instrument. Some of us flat out cannot hear if we are sharp or flat. We can hear that we're wrong or things don't sound right, but you can't tell if you're sharp or flat compared to what's going on. So instead of just throwing in the towel and being like, well, I'm not talented, I can't do this, you can just work smarter as opposed to harder. So one of the things I suggest to help your intonation, or at least know, even if you don't necessarily know, is to find out the tendencies of your instrument. And we have tendencies depending on, like, if you play French horn or if you play trombone or if you play euphonium. We have those tendencies, but also you individually might have different tendencies than what is the norm. We're all set up chop-wise different. We all blow into the horn a little different. So, it's going to stand that there's going to be some differences in how everybody plays. So what I would suggest is sitting down with a tuner and a piece of paper, and get your fundamental, your B flat or your F or whatever you like to tune on, get that really in tune. And so with that piece of paper, writing down every single note and how it's working. And then what you can do with that information is, while you're playing in your ensemble or as a solo or in your practice, you can take that information and use it to adjust accordingly. It at least gives you a starting point. You might be flat on a note you're regularly sharp on, but at least you've tried to fix it, and if you went the wrong way and it got worse, then you just go the opposite way. It's really easy. I'd rather, you guys try to do something than just sit there and just let it be. And if all of your notes are too much at one time, try to just fix one note like a week and just try to all right, my F is really out of tune. I'm gonna make sure that every time I hit F this week, I try to do something to make it a little bit better. And then once that's good, move on to the next note. Maybe it's your C sharp and you add the C sharp in, and then eventually you're playing way better in tune. And it might just be because you are working practically as opposed to just trying to figure it out audibly here. And that's not to say that your ears are not a wonderful resource, because believe me, they are, and you need to be listening all the time and using those things, but you need to use those in tandem with what you already know about your horn and your own playing. And that actually leads me to my question of the day. How often do you practice with a tuner? Are you like me and it's on your stand if you're practicing, even if you're not looking at it, it's just kind of there as a reminder? Do you pull it out when you're working on something that you've been told has bad intonation? Or do you just tune and put it away and never look at it again? Let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, guys, that's all I've got for you on how to tune your brass instrument. If you like this video, hit that like button. And again, if you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button to get more videos like this directly to you. Also want to give a big shout out to my Patreon patrons. Thank you so much for your patronage. If you are thinking about becoming a patron, check out the link to my Patreon down below. But as always, guys, I'm Aaron Campbell, reminding you to be happy, but never satisfied. I'll see you next time.